Most recently in Egypt, where we have reports now that churches have been burned. Many of the Coptic Christians have been martyred. And we see these things, and we sometimes might wonder if these are signs of the end times. Again, we're still looking for signs from God. And it's always attractive for people to look for signs of the end times, the times when God's going to come back and say, okay, that's it. It's well known in church circles, though, if you want to draw people into your church, just tell them that you have the inside information about when God is coming again in judgment. Because we like that kind of insider trading. We like to know what God is up to. But Jesus said this about it. He said, the angels in heaven don't know, not even the Son, him, Jesus. He didn't know himself. Only God the Father knows. And we should not be so concerned about the time of judgment that we forget what we are supposed to be doing anyway. And that is to share the love of God, to share the story of God working in our lives. And it's easy to get caught up with one word or phrase in a passage and just go off on a tangent. I spent 6 years working as a weatherman for the United States Air Force. So the end of the gospel today has always caught my attention. And later in Luke, Jesus talks about the red sky in the morning and red sky at night. It's easy for me to say Jesus is right about basic weather forecasting, and I should be preaching about that. But that's a very dull sermon. But the point Jesus is making here is some signs are from God and they're being ignored. And some signs from God are being misinterpreted. He gives the specific example here of division in the world over the Christian message. And that's not an easy passage to hear or to read. Not all gospel, which is supposed to mean good news, is warm and fuzzy. Not all signs from God will make us feel good. The fire is a fire of purification, a fire that can destroy relationships, sure. A fire, though, that is still at work in the world today. But fire can also do good things, like bringing warmth and light. And when someone is baptized, we present them with a lit candle, a little flame on it. And we say these words from Jesus, let your light so shine before others that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Every day, each and every one of us have signs given to us by God, showing us, if nothing else, that he has a great love and concern for us. We should be sharing those stories. We should be sharing those stories of God's actions and signs in our lives. They, in turn, can become signs for others. I hardly have a day or a week that goes by that I do not have a sign that God is involved and active in the world and even in my own ministry. I cannot tell you how many times I have shown up or called someone at exactly the right time when they needed someone there or someone to talk to. Those times are a constant reminder of God's presence and guidance in my life. I know that when I show up at just the right time or call at just the right time, it's not because I'm that clever, because I know I'm not that smart. And you've known me long enough to be nodding your heads right now and saying, oh yeah, Pastor, we know that. Recently, I had a sign from God that I feel compelled to share, and it is my hope that this true story becomes a sign for you today, at least one of them. I have an older sister, Marianne, who I discovered. I didn't know I had an older sister until 20 years ago. And that's a whole other story about God's guidance. Full-blooded sister. Well, a few years ago, she learned she had an inoperable brain aneurysm. They could operate, but there would be brain damage. To what extent they wouldn't know, because it was in the inner part of the brain. So for the past few years, she has been living with like a ticking time bomb in her head. She had special classes and instructions given to the local EMTs to help her when it happened. And last year, she called and told me that the aneurysm, that bulge in a blood vessel that's supposed to be maybe the size of the lead of a pencil, that aneurysm had grown to the size of a dime. It had grown very rapidly. It was very large and very dangerous. We had several conversations this past year. Each time I would make a point to tell her that I loved her, because each time I wondered if that would be the last time we spoke. My sister has a good friend, Vicki, who was dying from cancer. Vicki had gone beyond the expectations of any of the doctors. She'd lived beyond the 6 months to more than 2 years. And she lived each day of her life to the fullest. And my sister took her cue from her. A month ago, Vicki's time was drawing near. It was very evident. And my sister, who could not fly because of her aneurysm, drove 6 hours to see her, checking the locations of all the hospitals along the way in case she had an emergency. And when she got there, they visited. And during that time, my sister told Vicki what an inspiration she had been to live her life to the fullest, even while knowing that death was near. Going to tell someone you know is dying some good things. We sometimes call that flowers for the living. It's something that we should do, not just for people who are dying, but for everyone. At the end of the visit, Vicki told her sister to come closer, and she placed her hand on my sister's head, on Marianne's head, and said, "Be well." My sister returned home and shortly afterwards received the news of Vicki's death. In the meantime, Marianne, who has had an accelerated schedule of MRIs done to monitor the aneurysm, had one other scan done. And the next day the doctor called and said there seems to be an irregularity in the most recent imaging, and could she come in and have it redone? Complaining she did. And then the doctor said, "I want you to stay here while I take a look at this. Come into my office." And she came in and sat down with fear and trepidation. And she watched as the neurologist examined her brain images, first the ones from the previous year, and then the 2 most recent ones. He did this for almost 5 minutes. Then he said, "I don't know how to explain this, but your aneurysm is gone. There's nothing left of it but 4 little pinpoints to remind us it was there. Most people have that much anyway." We're calling my sister's friend St. Vicky now. I was told Vicky's funeral was a celebration, and why not? She had lived long enough to become a true instrument of God and God's love, and that's the best that any of us can ever do. Well, that is the story of God's love and incredible actions I wanted to share with you today. It is my hope that this becomes a sign for you. But not just so we can feel good or wonder about how great God is. Wander. But to remind us also that you are, an instrument of God's will and action on earth as well. Let him use you as he will. Amen.